Is Safer Seas a new beginning to Sea of Thieves? First, let me go on record. I am personally against Safer Seas as it's been presented thus far by Rare. That may change in the future as there's still a couple of months before its intended release, which means time to change its mechanics by then. But what's clear is that a form of Safer Seas will become a reality come December. So what does that mean for Sea of Thieves? And what does it mean for its players? I've spent the last week pondering, reviewing community posts across YouTube, Twitter, and Discord. I've broken down my thoughts for both the PvP-centric and the PvE-centric player bases, and I would love to know your thoughts in the comments of this video. Let's start with why Safer Seas is coming to the game. According to Mike Chapman, creative director of Sea of Thieves, the game that Sea of Thieves represents today, all the shared world quote-unquote magic of the game, continues to be the primary way to play the game. This would be the high seas experience that will be available as an option come December. So Rare intends to use Safer Seas as a mechanism to teach players how to play the game, discovering the various PvE elements and acclimate themselves to the environment that is the Sea of Thieves sandbox before moving on to high seas. Currently, this kind of tutorial is represented by the Maiden Voyage, which I feel that all would agree is not the best in terms of teaching players the various aspects of the game before putting their feet to the fire in the adventure mode that we are in today. Now, there could be an argument, and trust me, there have been, regarding whether it would have been more appropriate to update Maiden Voyage instead with gameplay mechanics like visiting a sea fort, a shrine, actually being able to fight the Meg or skeleton ship that spawns in during the voyage. Instead, Rare has decided to open up the entire sandbox for people to enjoy at their own pace. And what this means is that Safer Seas won't be a place just for new players, but for players who wish to opt out of PvP encounters altogether. And that's where we have our conflict. Almost 6 years in, Rare will be offering a change in the core mechanics to how Sea of Thieves operates, and the community is at an emotional crossroads. There's a need to understand both sides more deeply, recognizing the genuine concerns that arise from the hearts of dedicated players, regardless of what side they're on, because each of them has a passion for the game. Let's consider the PvE-centric player first. For some, the original spirit of Sea of Thieves can be intense, sometimes overwhelmingly so. It's a fact that some players are just looking to play the game without other players' interference. Whether that's through completing tall tales, company voyages, fishing, and more, they feel that the game today does not afford them the opportunity to do so. In addition, there are other factors that can make Safer Seas a more enticing option for some. For those players with families, especially children, who are interested in playing Sea of Thieves, it is undeniable that having control over whether or not you'll encounter another player makes a huge difference in terms of receptiveness by the parent. Up to 4 members of a household could come together and experience Sea of Thieves, going through the tall tales to fight the Gold Order or explore an underwater shrine together. Players with disabilities, physical or otherwise, may find Safer Seas to be alluring to them as well, depending on how interested they are in player interaction. Something to also consider, which isn't just PvE centric, but I'll include here, is that with Safer Seas, every player will now have access to their own sandbox for content creation. Whether you want to craft your own narrative in cinematic form, use Safer Seas for your next SOT shot or Style of Thieves submission, or just capturing screenshots for future thumbnails, having access to a private space to do this in is a boon for anyone who's a content creator or considering to be one in the future. For the PvP-centric player, they have several concerns. First, the arrival of Safer Seas means a potential splitting of the player base. While Safer Seas' intention is to be a place where people can grow into high seas, the concern is that too many current players and too few new players will be willing to make the jump to the core game mode now that there's a safe mode for them to play in, even with reduced rewards. Over time, this could lead to stagnation in both modes. Second, even if players do make the jump into high seas from Safer Seas, the one area where they will still have zero experience in, even if they spent hundreds of hours in Safer Seas, would be PvP. This means that there's a chance, potentially higher than normal, that PvP players will still sink these players and potentially force them back into Safer Seas, even though that's not the PvP player's intention. This will again divide the player base further. Finally, in a question of fairness, there's the matter of commendations. As part of the Season 10 preview, Rare did make clear that at least some of the commendations and achievements would be unlockable in safer seas. For those that have already completed these commendations in the current adventure mode, some see this as a slap in the face, considering their own difficulties in accomplishing these tasks, some of which are quite difficult to achieve when other players are around. Removing these barriers and letting safer seas players unlock these rewards without the challenge of PvP is leaving a bad taste in some players' mouths. Let me share my personal opinions on everything I've talked about, but let me also provide a bit of context as to why I have them. I've been playing the game since launch, back in March of 2018. I've seen plenty of highs and lows from Sea of Thieves across that time. I'm primarily a PvE player, but I don't run from fights. Unless I've got a ton of loot on board, in which case, catch me if you can. For me, the safer seas argument of a mode where I can chill and play the game at my own pace without conflict is something I can respect, but I disagree with. From the very beginning, all the way back to the technical alpha, it was always made clear that with any journey on the Sea of Thieves, there would always be the possibility of a PvP encounter. And to be fair, even back when the game first launched, there were asks of a PvE or private environment on the official Sea of Thieves forums at that time as well. I believe that what the crux of this argument comes down to is, I can't play as often as others can. Their skill level is higher than mine, but I don't want to lose my progress, so I'll just play in safer seas. This mindset is a reality born not just in Sea of Thieves, but any game that has aspects of PvP in it. Some players will be better than others in combat because they play more. I know of players that practice TDMs, or Team Deathmatch, daily. Now, I believe that safer seas proponents do have a point, in that many shared world games that include PvP have an opt-in or a safe zone that those players can play in normally without much fear. Think HiSec in EVE Online, or Blue Zones in Albion Online. This is where the restrictions placed on safer seas are so critical in offering players the choice to play in them, but not the comfortability or desire to stick to them forever. To that point, I feel that the gold and reputation restrictions are mostly balanced, especially when considering that safer seas players will also not have the luxury of selling at a sovereign's tent due to not having any captain ships. And anyone who is going to stack treasure in a no-conflict server would have probably found an alliance server by now. Let's not kid ourselves here. But it's my opinion that commendations should remain a high seas exclusive. Rare has already confirmed that Forts of the Damned and Forts of Fortune will not be available on safer seas, but these are just a few of the hundreds of commendations available to unlock. Each of these commendations can have a story to tell associated with them. I can tell you how nervous I was trying to get all my Skeleton Throne commendations as an example, cannoning out of my sloop, missing the target, and praying that no other ship heard the shot and was heading over to me. But it's a memory I have that makes me smile. I don't believe you could capture that same feeling on safer seas. In addition, there are other commendations like Glitterbeard that require multiple crews and have to be done on high seas, and it would be a shame if players didn't experience them. So does this mean that Sea of Thieves will experience a new beginning? I believe that Rare has a plan, like their oft-mentioned 5-year plan in years past, for the future of Sea of Thieves. And I think that with any live service game, this game will continue to change over time. And I want nothing but the best for it. For my part, I would love if Rare would continue to push high seas as the core experience for Sea of Thieves, because that's what I believe it to be. For those that will be playing on safer seas, however, I wish you well, and I hope that you'll continue to be a part of the Sea of Thieves community for years to come. And I wish the same to the folks sticking to the high seas. And I hope that we can continue to grow this game together, because at the end of the day, this is a game unlike any other that we all appreciate in our own ways. Let me know how you feel in the comments. Until next time, this is Jon Bardcore signing off, saying so long and take care.